In the stillness of midnight, a struggling young mechanic crosses paths with a wealthy girl stranded on the road. What begins as a simple act of kindness soon unravels into a shocking rev-started. Her powerful billionaire mother is the woman who once abandoned him. A story of heartbreak, secrets, and an unexpected chance at family. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. The night in San Diego carried a stillness that seemed almost eerie. Streetlights buzzed softly, and the occasional hum of a passing car broke the silence. Ethan stood outside his small garage, rolling down the shutters after a long day. The scent of grease and motor oil clung to his clothes, a familiar perfume of struggle and survival. For Ethan, nights were quiet, sometimes lonely, but always filled with worry. His garage wasn't doing well. Bills piled up, customers were scarce, and every dollar counted. Yet he kept going, clinging to hope that tomorrow might bring better fortune. As Ethan adjusted his jacket against the cool night breeze, his eyes caught a faint glow in the distance. A luxury sedan was pulled over by the curb, steam billowing from under its hood. He frowned, curiosity mixing with concern. It wasn't common to see such high-end cars in this working-class neighborhood, especially at midnight. Moving closer, he noticed a slender figure standing beside the car. She looked fragile, her arms wrapped around herself, her face illuminated by the dim streetlight. A teenager, no older than 17, dressed in clothes far too fine for this street. Her name, as he would soon learn, was Sophia. At that moment, though, all Ethan saw was a girl with fear in her eyes and uncertainty in her stance. She glanced around nervously, clutching her phone, but too shaken to dial. When she noticed him approaching, her body tensed. Ethan raised his hand slightly, a gesture of peace. "Need some help?" he asked gently, his voice low and steady. She hesitated, biting her lip, before finally giving a small nod. Relief and mistrust danced together in her eyes. Ethan approached the car, lifting the hood. A blast of hot steam met his face, and he stepped back, squinting at the mess inside. The radiator was shot, a hose loose, and coolant had sprayed across the engine. He muttered under his breath, then grabbed a rag from his pocket. Sophia stood nearby, watching him with wide, anxious eyes. She looked like someone who had never been stranded before, someone used to chauffeurs and privilege, not broken-down cars at midnight. Ethan glanced at her, once, then focused back on the machine. "Don't worry," he said, "I'll get you back on the road." Sophia's hands trembled slightly as she held her phone close, but she didn't call anyone. Instead, she watched Ethan work, with quiet fascination. The way his hands moved with confidence, the calm in his voice, it all reassured her in ways she couldn't explain. Ethan had no fancy tools, just his worn-out kit from the garage, but his expertise showed in every motion. He tightened the hose, refilled coolant, and wiped down the engine with care. Sweat beaded his forehead despite the cool air. But he didn't complain. His world revolved around fixing things, and right now, this car was his world. As minutes stretched into nearly an hour, Ethan finally closed the hood and tested the engine. It roared back to life, smooth and steady. Sophia's face lit up instantly, her shoulders relaxing for the first time. She quickly reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a crisp bill, far more than the repair was worth. Ethan glanced at it, then shook his head firmly. "No," he said with a soft smile, "you don't owe me anything, just get home safe." The words carried weight, not just kindness. For Ethan, this wasn't about money. It was about humanity, about helping someone who needed it. Sophia blinked, stunned. In her world, everything had a price. People never did things without expecting something in return. Her lips parted as if to argue, but Ethan had already stepped back, wiping his hands on his rag. His calmness, his refusal to take payment struck her more deeply than she realized. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice almost trembling. Ethan gave a small nod, watching as she climbed into her car. The luxury sedan glided away, headlights cutting through the night, leaving Ethan alone once more under the streetlight's pale glow. For a moment, Ethan stood frozen, staring at the empty street where the car had been. He didn't know who she was, where she came from, or why her presence left a strange impression on him. But something about her eyes, those tear-filled, uncertain eyes, stayed with him. He shook off the thought, returning to his garage. The clock struck 1 in the morning. He had a long day ahead. But as he lay in his small cot at the back of the garage, Sophia's face kept flickering in his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that this chance encounter was only the beginning. The morning sun crept through the dusty windows of Ethan's small garage, casting long shadows across the worn concrete floor. He had slept little, his mind replaying the midnight encounter over and over. Though he tried to brush it off, something about Sophia lingered in his thoughts. She wasn't just another stranger. On the road, her fragility, her gratitude, and the unspoken weight in her eyes made her unforgettable. Ethan busied himself with routine tasks, checking oil levels, tightening bolts, and rearranging his scattered tools, trying to drown out the unease that gnawed at him from within. By mid-morning, the streets outside his garage were bustling again. The sound of engines, distant horns, and the chatter of passers-by filled the air. Ethan was bent over a worn-out pickup truck when he heard the low hum of an approaching engine. Looking up, he froze. A sleek black SUV rolled to a stop outside his shop, its polished frame gleaming in the California sun. This was no ordinary vehicle. It screamed wealth and influence. Ethan straightened, wiping grease from his hands onto a rag, his chest tightening with curiosity and dread. The SUV's door opened, and out stepped Sophia. She was different from the frightened girl he'd met the night before. Her posture was confident, her clothes pristine, and her face calm yet determined. Gone were the trembling hands and teary eyes. Instead, she carried an air of purpose. She walked toward Ethan, her eyes locking onto his with quiet gratitude. "My mom wants to meet you," she said softly, though the seriousness in her tone carried weight. Ethan's brows furrowed. Her mom? He hadn't expected to see her again, much less meet her family. Before he could respond, the other door opened. A woman emerged, tall and elegant, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit. Her heels clicked sharply against the pavement as she walked, her presence commanding immediate attention. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He knew that face. Everyone did. Rebecca Hayes, the billionaire businesswoman, philanthropist, and empire builder. Her name graced headlines, her interviews filled television screens, and her influence stretched across the country. Yet for Ethan, recognition cut deeper than fame. He had seen that face long before the world celebrated it. He had seen it on the day his childhood ended. His hands trembled as he dropped the rag. Memories surged like a flood, raw and uninvited. Rebecca Hayes wasn't just a public figure, she was his mother. The same woman who had walked away when he was a child, leaving him with nothing but silence and questions. He remembered the funeral of his father, the crushing weight of loss, and a glimpse of Rebecca holding a baby, walking away without ever looking back. That image had haunted him for years, and now here she was, standing in front of him, her eyes wide with disbelief. Rebecca froze too, her polished composure cracking as her gaze fell upon Ethan. For a long, unbearable moment, the world seemed to stop. "Ethan!" Her voice trembled, the name escaping her lips like a ghost. Her eyes searched his face, tracing every feature with a mix of shock and guilt. "My son," she whispered, the words breaking under the weight of years, unspoken. The title struck Ethan like a blow. Son, a word that had felt empty for so long, suddenly spoken by the woman who had abandoned him. His chest tightened, anger and pain colliding within him. Ethan's mind reeled, torn between disbelief and fury. How could she just appear now, after all these years? After all the nights he had gone to bed hungry, alone, wishing for answers? His jaw clenched as he met her. "Gaze." "Don't," he said sharply, his voice rough. Rebecca flinched, the strength she carried in boardrooms and media appearances suddenly dissolving in the presence of the boy she had left behind. Sophia's eyes darted between them, confusion and worry flickering across her young face. She hadn't expected this, and Ethan could see she didn't understand the storm unraveling before her. Rebecca stepped forward, her hand trembling as if to reach for him. "Ethan, she began, but he cut her off. "Why now?" His voice cracked, the years of silence spilling into the air. "Where were you when I needed you? When Dad died, when I had nothing?" His words were sharp, fueled by wounds that had never healed. Rebecca's lips quivered, her polished image faltering. She looked at Sophia, then back at Ethan, her eyes glistening. I thought I was protecting you," she whispered, her voice breaking. But Ethan only shook his head, bitterness etched across his face. Silence filled the garage, heavy and suffocating. Sophia stepped closer, her voice trembling. "You're my brother?" The realization hung in the air, fragile yet undeniable. Ethan turned to her, his anger softening just slightly at the innocence in her eyes. She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't been part of Rebecca's choices. His heart wavered, caught between resentment for his mother and compassion for the sister he never knew he had. Rebecca's tears spilled freely now, her voice pleading. "Ethan, I made mistakes, but please, let me explain. Let me make this right." But Ethan's heart was not so easily swayed. He had built walls around his pain, walls that had taken years to construct. To let her in now felt impossible. "You can't erase the past," he said quietly, his voice firm, though his hands shook. "You can't walk back into my life like nothing happened." Rebecca's shoulders sagged, her strength faltering. She wasn't the untouchable business tycoon. Now she was just a mother begging for forgiveness. Sophia placed a hand on Ethan's arm, her eyes wide with hope. "Please, give her a chance," she whispered. Ethan closed his eyes, struggling against the storm inside him. He wanted to push them away, to protect himself from reopening wounds that had never healed. Yet looking at Sophia's hopeful face, something in him hesitated. Perhaps this encounter wasn't an accident. Perhaps fate had led that broken car to his street last night for a reason. Still, forgiveness wasn't something he could summon easily. His chest ached as he turned back to Rebecca, his voice low and pained. "I don't know if I can," he admitted. The truth was raw, and for the first time, Rebecca nodded, accepting it. Rebecca stepped back slightly, her composure slowly returning, though her eyes never left her son's. "I'll wait," she said softly. "However long it takes, I'll wait. I lost you once. I won't lose you again." Her words lingered in the air, fragile yet determined. Ethan looked away, his mind racing. The garage, once a place of solitude and struggle, had now become the center of a storm that would change everything. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was clear: the past had finally caught up with him, and nothing would ever be the same again. The air inside the garage felt almost suffocating, charged with emotions too raw to contain. Ethan's chest tightened, his voice breaking as he finally spoke the words he had buried for years. "You left me with nothing," he said, his tone carrying the weight of 1,000 sleepless nights. His eyes burned as he stared at Rebecca, the mother who had vanished when he needed her most. Rebecca's lips quivered, and for once the flawless billionaire exterior melted away, leaving behind nothing but regret. "I made mistakes I can't erase," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But you helped her." Her hand motioned toward Sophia, whose eyes widened with the realization of everything unraveling before her. Rebecca's voice cracked again. "Without even knowing who she was, you helped my daughter. You helped your own sister." The words hung heavy in the air, like a truth too sharp to process. Ethan's heart pounded, every memory of abandonment colliding with the fragile hope of connection. He clenched his fists, torn between anger and disbelief. Sophia's eyes filled with tears, her voice a whisper that trembled. "You're my brother." The innocence in her words pierced through Ethan's defenses. For years, Ethan had believed he was alone in the world. No mother, no siblings, no family beyond memories of his father. Yet here stood Sophia, her expression a mirror of vulnerability and hope. His heart wavered as he looked at her, seeing not just the daughter of a powerful woman, but a sister who had unknowingly walked into his life. Something inside him shifted, faint but undeniable. Rebecca's eyes locked on his, pleading, desperate. "Please," she whispered, tears streaming freely. "Give me a chance to make things right." Her voice trembled, like a woman terrified of losing her son forever. Silence fell again, heavy and unyielding. Ethan wanted to scream, to demand why she had abandoned him, why she thought money and apologies could erase the emptiness she had left behind. But the words refused to come. Instead, he stood frozen, lost between fury and longing, and then, before he could react, Sophia stepped forward. Her small frame shook as she wrapped her arms tightly around him. "I don't care about the past," she said through sobs. "You're my brother, and I don't want to lose you." Her tears soaked his shirt, her embrace clinging as though she feared he might vanish. Ethan's breath caught, his walls crumbling. His arms hovered uncertainly before instinct pulled them down around her. His hand rested gently on her shoulder, an unspoken acknowledgement of the bond they now shared. His chest ached, but for the first time in years, it wasn't just from pain. It was from something softer, something long buried. Rebecca's hand rose to her mouth, stifling a sob as she watched them. The sight of her two children estranged by time, united by fate, was almost too much for her to bear. For the first time in decades, she felt the crushing weight of her choices. Rebecca stepped forward slowly, her voice trembling. "Ethan, I don't expect forgiveness overnight. I know I failed you, but let me try. Let me be here now." Her eyes searched his face, desperate for any sign of acceptance. Ethan's jaw clenched as he pulled back slightly, looking at her with a mixture of hurt and uncertainty. "Why now?" he asked, his voice low but piercing. Rebecca's eyes filled with shame. "Because I couldn't hide forever," she admitted. "Because seeing you last night, even without knowing who you were, reminded me of the son I lost." Her confession shook Ethan's resolve. His thoughts spun as he tried to process her words. Could she really mean it? Could a woman who had walked away all those years ago truly want to rebuild what she had destroyed? Doubt gnawed at him, but Sophia's presence grounded him. Her hand clung tightly to his, her eyes shimmering with hope. "Please, Ethan," she whispered, "don't shut us out." Her voice cracked with sincerity, her plea tugging at the part of him that still longed for family. For the first time, Ethan wondered if forgiveness wasn't about erasing the past, but about allowing a future. The garage, usually filled with the smell of oil and the sound of tools, now echoed with the fragile hum of reconciliation. Ethan's chest rose and fell as he struggled to breathe through the storm inside him. He wanted to protect himself from more pain, but Sophia's tears and Rebecca's trembling voice pierced the armor he had carried for so long. Slowly, hesitantly, he nodded. "I don't know if I can forgive you," he said softly to Rebecca, "but I'll listen." The words weren't absolution, but they were a door cracked open, a possibility of healing. Rebecca exhaled shakily. Her knees weakened as relief washed over her. She had expected rejection, hatred, perhaps even silence. But Ethan's words, though guarded, carried a glimmer of hope. Rebecca's hand trembled as she reached out, not daring to touch him without permission. Sophia squeezed Ethan's hand tighter, smiling through her tears. "That's enough for now," she whispered, her voice gentle. The three of them stood in fragile unity, bound not by wealth or circumstance, but by something deeper. For Ethan, it was the beginning of a journey he hadn't expected, a journey toward family, toward forgiveness, toward a second chance at belonging. Time seemed to stand still. The garage transformed from a place of solitude into the birthplace of something new. Ethan's eyes softened as he looked at Sophia, her tear-stained face beaming with hope. For her sake, he couldn't let bitterness win. Perhaps he couldn't forgive Rebecca yet, but he could try for his sister, for himself. Rebecca's shoulders shook, silent sobs as she whispered, "Thank you." Ethan didn't reply, but the silence no longer carried only anger. It carried possibility. And that, for now, was enough. Later that evening, when the SUV finally pulled away, Ethan remained in the doorway of his garage, watching the taillights fade into the distance. The day had shattered the walls he had built around his heart, forcing him to confront truths he had spent years avoiding. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing for certain: his life would never be the same. Sophia's hug lingered on his shoulders, her words echoing in his mind. Brother, family. For the first time, those words didn't feel like a dream. They felt real, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough.